The Henderson family GPS tracker went silent at 11:43 p.m. on September 22nd, somewhere deep in the Appalachian wilderness. Search teams found their abandoned campsite the next morning. Tents still zipped, food untouched, as if they'd simply vanished into thin air. 3 weeks later, a wildlife camera captured something that made investigators question everything they thought they knew about this case. What it recorded at 4:22 a.m. wasn't just a missing family. It was evidence of something far more terrifying. This is the story of a family vacation that uncovered a deadly secret hiding in America's oldest mountains. Welcome to Shadows by Barry. I'm your host, and today we're diving into a case that exposed an underground network most people never knew existed. Before we begin, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like you were being watched while camping? Drop your experiences in the comments below. And if you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for weekly deep dive investigations into cases that will keep you up at night. The Henderson family wasn't your typical group of weekend warriors. Robert Henderson, 45 years old, had been a park ranger for over 2 decades. He knew these mountains like the back of his hand. Every trail, every hidden ravine, every dangerous slope that could claim an inexperienced hiker's life. His wife, Lisa, 42, worked as a nurse at the local hospital. She was no stranger to outdoor adventures either, having met Robert during a mountain rescue training exercise 20 years earlier. Together, they'd raised their children to respect and love the wilderness. Their son, Jake, just 16, was already an Eagle Scout with survival skills that impressed even his father's fellow rangers. The kid could start fire in a rainstorm and navigate by stars alone. And then there was Mia, their 14-year-old daughter. While her brother focused on survival skills, Mia was passionate about photography. She documented every family adventure with an artist's eye, always carrying her camera to capture the beauty her family showed her in the wild places of the world. This wasn't a family that made rookie mistakes in the wilderness. They were prepared, experienced, and careful, which is exactly why their disappearance was so baffling. Every September, the Henderson family took the same trip. It wasn't just a vacation, it was a pilgrimage. They were traveling to a remote section of the Blue Ridge Mountains to honor Robert's father, a ranger who had died in a climbing accident exactly 10 years earlier. This year was special. They were finally going to scatter the last of grandfather's ashes at a hidden waterfall that had been his favorite spot, a place so remote it didn't appear on any tourist maps, accessible only through Robert's insider knowledge of unmarked trails. The family had been planning this trip for months. They'd checked weather reports, filed their itinerary with the Park Service, and packed enough supplies for 5 days of self-sufficient camping. Robert even brought a satellite communicator, standard equipment for rangers venturing into areas with no cell service. Everything was planned perfectly. Too perfectly, as it would turn out. Day 1 of their trip went exactly as expected. Robert sent regular check-ins via their satellite communicator, reporting their progress and confirming they were on schedule. The messages were routine, almost boring in their normalcy. Day 2 started the same way. Morning check-in. Made great time yesterday. Kids are loving the views. Midday update. Found Dad's waterfall. Ceremony went beautifully. Heading to tonight's campsite. But then something changed. At 3:47 p.m., another message came through. Found something incredible up here. Never seen anything like it. We'll send photos when we have better signal. That was the last normal communication anyone received from the Henderson family. At 11:43 p.m. that night, Robert's emergency beacon activated. The GPS coordinates placed them 12 miles from the nearest road, deep in a section of wilderness that few people ever visited. And then nothing. Complete silence. When an emergency beacon activates, park rangers don't wait for morning. Within 2 hours, a rescue team was hiking through the darkness toward the Henderson family's last known position. It took them 18 grueling hours to reach the remote campsite. What they found defied explanation. The family's 2 tents were still standing, zipped shut as if the occupants had simply stepped out for a moment. Inside, sleeping bags were arranged but unused. Personal items were scattered around naturally. Toothbrushes by the camp sink, books on the picnic table, Lisa's reading glasses folded neatly beside her pillow. But here's what stopped the search team cold. Dinner was still in the camp stove. Not burned or overcooked, but barely warm, as if the family had just finished eating when something made them leave immediately. Now, what would make an experienced park ranger like Robert Henderson abandon a campsite without even turning off the stove? Let me know in the comments what you think could cause that kind of immediate evacuation. The search team looked for the usual suspects: signs of animal attack, severe weather, medical emergency. They found none of it. No blood, no torn fabric, no evidence of struggle. It was as if 4 people had simply evaporated. But they did find something that didn't belong. 200 yards from the Hendersons' campsite, searchers discovered tire tracks. Now, if you know anything about wilderness camping, you'll understand why this was so disturbing. These coordinates were 12 miles from the nearest road, accessible only by hiking trails too narrow and steep for any vehicle. Yet there they were, tire tracks from something heavy. Not an ATV or small utility vehicle, but something with the weight and width of a full-size truck or van. The tracks were fresh, probably made within the last 24 hours. They led from a small clearing back into the dense forest, following what appeared to be an unmarked path that didn't show up on any Park Service maps. There was something else. Footprints, multiple sets of them, from heavy boots, the kind worn by law enforcement or military personnel. These prints surrounded the Hendersons' campsite, as if several people had been watching the family before moving in. And then there was the smell. Several searchers reported a strange chemical odor lingering around the campsite, something sharp and medicinal that had no business in a wilderness setting. Within 48 hours, this had become the largest search operation in the park's history. The FBI joined the investigation because Robert was a federal employee, and there were concerns about potential terrorism or kidnapping. Helicopter crews with thermal imaging cameras scanned thousands of acres of wilderness. They found nothing. No heat signatures, no signs of the missing family. Ground teams with search dogs covered every trail and stream in a 20-mile radius. But here's where it gets really strange. The search dogs kept refusing to track beyond a certain invisible perimeter. These were highly trained animals that could follow a scent trail for miles, but something was making them stop, whine, and retreat from specific areas of the forest. Local residents started coming forward with reports that seemed unrelated but created a disturbing pattern. Strange lights moving through the mountains at night. The sound of heavy machinery in areas where no construction was permitted. Federal vehicles driving on restricted Forest Service roads after dark. One elderly man who'd lived in the mountains his whole life told investigators something that sent chills down their spines. Those mountains been talking funny for months now. Sounds that don't belong, smells that ain't natural. Something's been going on up there, and it ain't good. What searchers didn't know was that the Henderson family had stumbled upon something they were never meant to see, and the people responsible would do anything to keep it secret. Dr. Sarah Chun had no idea she was about to crack open one of the most disturbing criminal cases in American history. She was just trying to study bear migration patterns. As a wildlife biologist with State University, Dr. Chun had spent 3 years setting up a network of trail cameras across a 50-square-mile section of the Blue Ridge Mountains. 30 cameras total, programmed to capture photos and video whenever motion triggered their sensors. Her research focused on how black bears move through the wilderness, but the cameras captured everything: deer, hikers, the occasional lost tourist stumbling through the woods at night. Dr. Chin collected data from her cameras once a month, usually finding exactly what she expected: thousands of images of wildlife going about their daily business. It was methodical, scientific work that rarely produced surprises. But when she downloaded the files from Camera 23 in October, she found something that made her hands shake. The timestamp read October 15th, 4:22 a.m., 3 weeks and 2 days after the Henderson family had vanished. At first, Dr. Chun thought the camera had malfunctioned. The image quality was grainy, typical of infrared night vision, but what she saw didn't make sense with everything she knew about the missing family case. For figures were moving through the forest. A man, a woman, and 2 children, matching the Henderson family's description perfectly. But they weren't lost or wandering aimlessly. They were being led by several other figures, people in dark tactical gear who move with military precision. The Henderson family was alive, but they were clearly not free. Look carefully at what I'm describing here. Robert Henderson, the experienced park ranger, was walking with his hands zip-tied behind his back. Lisa moved with the careful gait of someone who was injured or weak. The children, Jake and Mia, stayed close to their mother, their body language screaming fear. But here's what made Dr. Chin immediately call the FBI. The people escorting them were wearing federal law enforcement gear. The same equipment used by park rangers, FBI agents, and other government personnel. Now pause the video and think about this. What would you do if you discovered footage showing missing people being held by what appear to be federal agents? Dr. Chin spent the next 72 hours reviewing 3 weeks of footage from all 30 cameras. What she found revealed a systematic operation that had been going on right under everyone's noses. Camera after camera showed the same pattern. Federal vehicles accessing restricted areas during night hours. Personnel in tactical gear moving equipment through the wilderness. Construction materials being transported to areas where no construction was permitted. Most disturbing of all, she found footage of other people. Hikers who had gone missing over the past 2 years. People whose disappearances had been written off as tragic accidents or cases of people simply getting lost in the wilderness. They were all being taken to the same location, a remote valley that didn't appear on any public maps, accessible only through the network of hidden roads that Dr. Chen's cameras had inadvertently documented. The scope of what she had uncovered was staggering. This wasn't just about the Henderson family. It was evidence of a systematic operation that had been kidnapping wilderness visitors for years. What we're about to reveal will shock you to your core. This wasn't a random kidnapping. It was something much bigger and more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. If you're ready to learn the truth about what was happening in those mountains, hit that like button right now. And make sure you're subscribed to Shadows by Barry, because this story is about to take a turn that will change everything you think you know about our government institutions. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. When Dr. Chin presented her evidence to the FBI, the response was immediate and massive. Within 24 hours, a joint task force involving the FBI, DEA, and inspector generals from multiple federal agencies was formed. What they discovered in those mountains was a criminal operation so large and sophisticated that it reached the highest levels of the Park Service and beyond. Hidden in the remote valley that Dr. Chen's cameras had revealed was a fully operational medical facility. Not a crude wilderness laboratory, but a sophisticated complex with multiple buildings, power generators, and equipment worth millions of dollars. The facility had been built over a period of 3 years, using legitimate federal construction contracts and equipment. On paper, it was listed as an environmental monitoring station. In reality, it was something far more sinister. Records seized during the raid revealed the true purpose of this hidden facility: illegal human experimentation. Pharmaceutical companies were paying federal employees to provide test subjects for drugs that hadn't been approved for human trials. The Henderson family hadn't stumbled upon this operation by accident. Robert's expertise as a park ranger and his knowledge of remote areas made him a threat to the secrecy of the facility. When the family discovered the construction site during their camping trip, they became witnesses who couldn't be allowed to leave. But Robert wasn't just any witness. He was a federal employee who would be believed if he reported illegal activity in the park. His testimony could have brought down the entire operation. So they took the whole family. For 3 weeks, the Hendersons had been held in underground cells at the facility. Robert had been subjected to experimental treatments that left him severely weakened. Lisa and the children were being prepared for their own research protocols. The evidence recovered from the facility was staggering. Detailed records of 47 missing persons over a 5-year period. Hikers, campers, hunters, all people who had ventured into remote areas alone or in small groups. People whose disappearances could be explained as wilderness accidents. The Henderson family wasn't the first, and they wouldn't have been the last if not for one crucial piece of evidence that the conspirators never saw coming. Dr. Chen's trail cameras captured something else in the days following her discovery. Increased activity at the facility, vehicles moving in and out, equipment being loaded onto trucks. The conspirators were beginning to evacuate. Federal agents realized they had a narrow window to rescue the Henderson family before they were moved or worse. SWAT teams were deployed immediately, but the remote location meant a dangerous nighttime raid through treacherous mountain terrain. The raid began at 3 a.m. on October 18th. Tactical teams surrounded the facility, while helicopter crews provided air support. What they found inside was even worse than they had feared. The Henderson family was discovered in underground, holding cells that could only be described as prison cells. Robert was barely conscious, his body weakened by 3 weeks of forced medical procedures. Lisa had been given experimental psychiatric drugs that left her disoriented and confused. Jake and Mia had been spared the worst of the experimentation, but both children showed signs of severe psychological trauma. They had been forced to watch their parents suffer while being told they would be next. The investigation that followed revealed a conspiracy that reached into multiple federal agencies. 12 government employees were ultimately arrested, including high-ranking officials in the Park Service, FDA, and Department of Health and Human Services. The scheme worked like this. Pharmaceutical companies paid massive bribes to federal employees who would provide volunteers for dangerous drug trials. Remote wilderness areas were perfect hunting grounds because disappearances could be explained as hiking accidents. The illegal research generated over $50 million in revenue over 5 years. The money was used to fund more elaborate facilities and expand the operation to other national parks across the country. Most shocking of all, the cover-up reached the highest levels of the Park Service. Officials who should have been protecting wilderness visitors were instead delivering them to criminals. The lead conspirator, a Park Service regional director named Marcus Webb, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. 11 other federal employees received sentences ranging from 25 years to life. The pharmaceutical companies involved paid over $200 million in settlements to the families of victims. Several executives were also imprisoned, though most received lighter sentences in exchange for cooperation. The Henderson family was rescued after 28 days in captivity, but their ordeal was far from over. Robert required months of medical treatment to recover from the experimental procedures. The entire family needed extensive psychological counseling to deal with the trauma. Robert Henderson retired from the Park Service on medical disability, but eventually made a full physical recovery. The psychological scars took longer to heal, but the family's ordeal brought them closer together rather than tearing them apart. Lisa returned to her work as a nurse, but became an advocate for missing persons' families, helping other families navigate the complex process of searching for lost loved ones. Jake, now 17, testified before Congress about the family's experience, helping to pass new legislation requiring independent oversight of federal wilderness activities. And Mia, the young photographer, provided one final piece of evidence that prosecutors hadn't expected. She had hidden a small digital camera in her clothing during the kidnapping and secretly recorded their captivity. Her footage became crucial evidence in the trials that followed. The Henderson case led to the most significant reform of wilderness management in American history. All national parks now have mandatory trail camera networks monitored by independent oversight committees. Federal employees can no longer access remote wilderness areas without proper authorization and GPS tracking. Any construction or research activity in protected lands requires approval from multiple agencies and public notification. A new missing persons database was created specifically for wilderness disappearances, with mandatory coordination between local, state, and federal agencies when anyone goes missing in federal lands. The Henderson family used their settlement money to establish the Wilderness Safety Foundation, which provides GPS beacons and emergency communication devices to families who can't afford them. The Henderson case exposed how our most trusted institutions can become hunting grounds for the unthinkable. A park ranger who dedicated his life to protecting wilderness visitors became a victim of the very system he served. If not for wildlife cameras and one determined scientist, this conspiracy might continue for years, claiming dozens more victims. Dr. Sarah Chen's research into bear migration patterns accidentally uncovered one of the most disturbing criminal enterprises in American history. This case changed how we monitor our wilderness areas forever. It proved that technology can be our greatest ally in protecting the innocent and exposing corruption, even when it reaches the highest levels of government. What do you think about the idea that federal employees could abuse their positions to prey on innocent families? Have you ever felt unsafe in what should have been protected wilderness areas? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to learn more about other cases where technology helped expose corruption and save lives, check out our investigation into how cell phone data solved a 20-year-old murder case. I'll put a link in the description and pin it in the comments. Thanks for watching this episode of Shadows by Barry. If this investigation opened your eyes to the dark possibilities hiding in our wilderness areas, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We publish new deep dive investigations every Wednesday, and trust me, you won't want to miss what we uncover next. Until next time, stay safe out there, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who are supposed to protect us.